Welcome to another Scottish Murders episode. This is part 4, the final part, of the Kay Wyllie and Nancy Nichol murder case. But this episode will be more about what happened after their murderer, Andrew Cameron's, appeal failed, and a bit about Andrew Cameron's family, specifically his mum's reactions and role at the time of Andrew Cameron being arrested and charged with both murders, his failed appeal, and what became of her, as well as what Andrew Cameron's younger brother Rodney was jailed for in 2015. Had he followed in his brother's footsteps? Before I get started, I wanted to tell you that Scottish Murders will be taking a break from the usual scheduled episodes for February, but we'll be back with our regular episodes on Tuesday the 10th of March. Our Bra and Belterian tier Patreon members, don't worry though, will continue to release episodes in February for you, where you'll get very early access to the scheduled episodes we plan to release to everyone in March. Speaking of our Patreon members, I just have to give a shout out to all of you and thank you once again for your continued support. Thank you so much to our Belterian members, Misty Dawn Cray, Jennifer MacDonald, Stephen Mason, Julian Hiles, and Western Witch. And a huge thank you to our Broyian members, Kelly, Shelley M, Tedious Tiger, Jamie Murdoch, Misty Shirer, I hope I'm saying that right, Robin DeAndrea Bishop, Lisa Masterton, and Fiona O'Sullivan. And a massive thank you to our free Patreon members too. Honestly, we appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you. If you'd like to become one of our Patreon members too, then for as little as $3 or £2.50 a month, I'll give you a shout out on a feature episode, post your name on our website, give you early access and ad-free episodes, and you'll get exclusive Scotland Then episodes, as well as our gratitude for your support. Or you can join the Belterian tier for $7 or £5.50 a month, where you'll get a Scottish Murders mobile phone background, an exclusive Scottish Murders sticker after 3 months of membership, and, here's a sneak peek, we're going to be adding more to this tier, so watch this space. So to become one of our valued and much loved Patreon members, visit patreon.com/Scottish Murders. Okay, I've got something else exciting to tell you about. I'd firstly love to give you a BBC documentary recommendation called The Man in the Mask, an Orkney Murder, which is narrated and hosted by journalist Hazel Martin. If you've not watched it, go and check it out. It's all about the murder of 26-year-old Shamsuddin Mahmood, who was shot while he worked in the Mumtaz restaurant in Kirkwall on Orkney on the 2nd of June 1994. Hazel revisits this case and takes a deep dive into whether Shamsuddin's convicted murderer had actually carried out this crime, or if a miscarriage of justice had taken place. In the programme, new information is given, with the most shocking revelation right near the end, just when you're beginning to be in two minds about Michael Ross's guilt. If you've already watched this documentary, what were your thoughts? Do you think Michael Ross was wrongly convicted, or is the right man behind bars? If you've not watched this already, I'd love to hear what you think after you've watched it. The reason I'm mentioning this documentary is because I've been given the absolute pleasure of speaking with journalist Hazel Martin about this documentary, where I plan to really find out what Hazel's thoughts were as she began her investigation into Shamsuddin Mahmood's murder, and where she stands now after everything she uncovered. So if you have any questions you'd like me to ask Hazel, then please let me know by emailing me direct at contact@scottishmurders.com, by DMing me on Instagram, or by commenting on this episode on YouTube or Spotify. Please get in touch soon though, as I'll be recording with Hazel a few days after this episode is released. I'll be releasing this episode sometime in February, so subscribe now so you don't miss it. One last thing before I get into this week's episode is to let you know that myself and my husband Peter will be at CrimeCon Birmingham on the 25th of April and CrimeCon London on the 3rd and 4th of October, and we would love to see as many of you at these events as we can. It would be great to meet you and speak to you about cases we've covered, if you have any cases you'd like us to cover, what you'd like to hear more of or less of on the podcast, just anything you'd like to talk to us about. We'd be delighted to chat with you. So please do go and get your tickets if you're thinking of coming. You don't want to miss out, like I did last year by not being able to attend CrimeCon Manchester at the last minute. So don't be me, go and get your tickets now by visiting crimecon.co.uk, and don't forget to use the code SCOTTISH at the checkout to get your discount. We can't wait to see you there and to have a good blether with you. Okay, that was a long intro this week, so without further ado, let's get started. We've heard all about Kay Wyllie and Nancy Nichol, but we've heard very little about Andrew Cameron and his family and how they coped when Andrew was arrested and convicted for the murders of Kay and Nancy. For this, I'm going to go back to just after Andrew had been found guilty at the murder trial in September 1985, when Andrew Cameron's mum, Marion, vowed to stand by her son. Within days of the verdict, Marion Cameron spoke to a Daily Record reporter at her luxury detached mock Georgian home in an exclusive area of Troon beside the golf club that she had shared with her husband and 4 children at the time of Andrew's arrest. Marion started by saying to the reporter that Andrew had been hounded by the police for 2 years, that Andrew did not have a violent nature, that he loved animals, and as well as a pet Labrador, he kept mice and gerbils. She ended by saying that there was no justice for Andrew. Vital evidence was kept from the court, and because of that, my son has lost 20 years of his life. There will be an appeal. Now, we already know the outcome of that appeal, and I'm guessing that vital evidence she mentioned that had been kept from the court was in fact the witness testimony from Ruby Steed and her husband Hugh, which again we already know the outcome of that being heard at the appeal hearing. But what we didn't know already was that Marion herself appeared to have also kept vital evidence from the court, when it was revealed that Andrew had in fact confessed to her that it had been Nancy who had been the late-night visitor at their home the night she vanished. The late-night visitor who Marion had been annoyed at as she and her son had woken her up. The late-night visitor who Marion said at the trial under oath that she couldn't remember the name of, or if her son had even mentioned her name, saying at the trial that all she could be sure of was that it definitely hadn't been Andrew's girlfriend. However, after the trial, it was revealed that Marion had in fact known this girl's name, as her son Andrew had actually confessed to his mum that it had been Nancy Nichol. I did wonder at the trial why the judge had kept reminding Marion while she was on the stand that she was under oath. Now I might know why. Despite Andrew having confirmed to his mum that this late-night visitor had been Nancy before she had disappeared, Marion never doubted her son for 1 second, and I'll tell you why later. But first, I mentioned that Andrew had a girlfriend at the time he brought Nancy Nichol home, and she was 18-year-old Kathleen. Despite Andrew likely having cheated on her, with him having brought Nancy Nichol to his home, Kathleen too believed Andrew was innocent, and she stood by Andrew upon his arrest, saying in the same Daily Record article that Andrew was a very special boyfriend. I could never believe he was capable of murder. He was gentle and kind. He never treated me badly in any way. The police said they had saved me and said I would have been the next victim. They loathed Andy. She went on to reveal that Andrew Cameron had actually proposed to her the day before, and that they had been in contact the whole time he had been on remand at a young offenders institution, where he had written love letters to her daily. Nothing else is ever mentioned about Kathleen or their engagement, so I have to assume that possibly following the collapse of the appeal, or sooner, Kathleen changed her mind and ended her relationship with Andrew Cameron. But the next time we hear from Marion Cameron was following the appeal being rejected in October 1987, where she said that she and Andrew were shattered regarding the decision, saying that she felt it was all wrong. He didn't have a chance. They put out witnesses, they disregarded everyone, and then they were allowed to make that decision on their own. 3 judges. They are Scottish. They don't want the law changed. He hasn't done it, and I don't see why he should sit for 18 years without a chance for something he hasn't done. Marion believed that her son had been fitted up. She ended by vowing that this would not be the end, and that she planned on getting full transcripts of the evidence at the trial and taking this and the fresh evidence that had been presented at the appeal hearing to the European Court of Human Rights. Andrew's solicitor, Joe Beltrami, also made his feelings clear when he said that the Crown prosecutes in the public interest, and the Crown, in my view, should be the very essence and fountain of fairness. The Crown should call evidence whether it is for their case or against their case, as long as it is relevant evidence. They should not tailor the evidence one way. So to me, that suggests that Joe Beltrami felt that evidence had been withheld from being presented at the appeal, although to this day, nothing about what this evidence could be has ever come out. 2 of the 5 fresh witnesses also spoke out after the appeal was rejected, with Ruby Steed saying, "I was flabbergasted. I told the truth in court, only to be branded a liar." And John Penman said, "If only the police had shown me that picture of Kay Wyllie as she was found at Dunure before the hearing in Edinburgh, I would have known I had not seen Kay Wyllie that night. It would have saved a lot of trouble. I am totally shattered for what I've been put through for this. Never again." I wonder why he was never shown the picture of Kay that was shown at the appeal hearing. Surely the defence would have wanted to have been sure before putting John Penham on the stand with his fresh evidence. That does seem strange, and a bit of a waste of everyone's time, and poor John was put through that ordeal only to be humiliated. After this, things quietened down, and nothing else was reported in the newspapers until April 1989, a year and a half after the appeal, but it wasn't regarding any updates around Andrew's case. The article in the Daily Record began with Marion stating that she continued to, and would always, stand by my son, before going on to reveal just how her life had been impacted in the years since her son Andrew had been arrested. As I said previously, at the time of Andrew Cameron being arrested in 1986 for Kay Wyllie and Nancy Nichol's murder, he stayed with his mum, dad and 3 siblings in a detached home in an exclusive area of Troon, a home valued at around £200,000 at the time. In today's money, that would be around £604,000 and $823,000. However, since then, Andrew's mum and her children had had to sell their family home and had initially moved to stay in a caravan outside of Troon, before Marion and her youngest son Rodney, who was 11 at the time of Andrew's arrest, moved back to Troon after being allocated a 2-bedroom council flat, where Marion and her son Rodney were currently living at the time of speaking to the Daily Record reporter in 1989. Marion's other 2 children had left home, but they lived nearby, and Marion reported that she now had 3 grandchildren too. She said that, "I don't feel sorry for myself that my fancy house is gone. All I know is that we moved to a caravan, and now we are back in Troon with no money." But losing their family home was nothing compared to what else the Cameron family faced shortly before Andrew's appeal hearing, when Marion's husband sadly passed away. Marion had so much on her plate at that time, her son in prison for murder and his appeal hearing being imminent, having 3 other young children to support and care for, and on top of that losing her husband in the midst of the hell she was already going through. But in 1989, 2 years after her husband died and Andrew's appeal had been rejected, Marion was sounding quite positive as she spoke to the Daily Record journalist. Now I just have to say something here, as it really confused me. Because from when Andrew was arrested all the way through the trial and the appeal hearing, Andrew's mum was referred to in newspapers as Marion. However, from 1989 onwards, any articles in newspapers referred to Andrew's mum as being called Ivy. Now, I'm not sure if she changed her name or if Ivy or Marion had been her middle name. I've no idea, but she went from Marion to Ivy. But for consistency, I'm going to stick with Marion for this story. Anyway, yes, Marion was quite positive and upbeat in 1989, saying that Andrew is in great spirits and that he still looks for light at the end of the tunnel. Going on to say that, "I know my son is a rascal. He used to steal cars and generally wind up the police, but he would never have harmed anyone." Now remember I told you earlier that there was a reason Marion never doubted her son for 1 second. Well, she revealed in this article that that was because Andrew told his father before he died he didn't do it, and he would never ever have lied to him. So now you know. Marion also revealed that she had been receiving such great support, including receiving letters from none other than Patrick Meehan, who himself had eventually been cleared of murdering Rachel Ross in Ayr 6 years after being convicted, a case we covered in our episode Glasgow's Day of Horror, the 1969 shooting rampage. Marion said that she valued this support so much and that this really helped to keep her going. One other thing that Marion said in this article was that Andrew's case will probably be held at the European Court of Appeal next year. Now, I'm not sure if his case was ever heard at the European Court of Appeal, but nothing was ever reported about this. In fact, the next time an article around Andrew Cameron appeared was in 1996, 7 years later, when Andrew's family and his solicitor, Joe Beltrami, were demanding his case be reopened. But why? Well, let me tell you. In June 1996, 37-year-old Gavin Maguire was found guilty of the sexual assault and murder of 16-year-old Mary Julian in Kilmarnock in December 1995. Now, according to Joe Beltrami in an article in The Scotsman on the 3rd of June 1996, apparently there were strong similarities between the attacks and murders of Kay Wyllie and Nancy Nichol and the attack and murder of Mary Julian. And so Andrew Cameron's family were demanding that the murders of Kay Wyllie and Nancy Nichol be reinvestigated, and they hoped that a pardon would be forthcoming. While Andrew's mum Marion was said to be too upset to comment, Andrew's brother Jack said that if Andrew was to be granted a Queen's pardon, then that would be great, but would he get compensation for what he has been through? Would we? Joe Beltrami, who was still Andrew's solicitor, said that he had already written to the Crown Office asking for Kay Wyllie and Nancy Nichol's cases to be reopened and for DNA tests on blood and semen found on Kay and Nancy to be carried out, to see if it were possible that Gavin Maguire could in fact have murdered Kay Wyllie and Nancy Nichol, as his client, Andrew Cameron, had consistently protested his innocence. With Joe Beltrami saying, the stark prospect of a possibly innocent man being locked up for years as a result of being wrongly convicted of 2 murders is extremely disturbing. Going on to say, I have always had my doubts over Cameron's convictions, but I cannot say I am optimistic. Joe Beltrami was right not to be optimistic, as annoyingly, again, nothing else was reported about this, and Andrew Cameron stayed in prison, having at that point served 10 years out of his 20-year sentence. 6 years later, in 2002, is when the next article about Andrew Cameron appears, and it's not good news for him. Following the European Convention of Human Rights having to be incorporated into Scots law, a review of all killers' cases and their sentences had become necessary, as the new legislation meant that instead of government ministers deciding when convicted killers could be released, judges would now set a minimum punishment period all those convicted of murder would have to serve before being considered for parole. And unluckily for Andrew, amongst many others, his case and sentence was to be reviewed too. This new law was supposed to be more humane, so that murderers knew how long they would have to serve before being eligible to apply for parole, but it didn't turn out so great for Andrew, that's for sure. When his case and sentence was reviewed by Lord McEwen, he ordered that Andrew Cameron now must serve a minimum of 30 years, as opposed to the original 20 years, before being eligible for parole. Again, after that, everything went quiet. Nothing else was reported. It would seem that Andrew Cameron, Joe Beltrami and Andrew's family had been beaten, but there were a couple more blows still to come for the Cameron family. Andrew Cameron's mum might have been defeated, but she never wavered in her support for her son, and she refused to believe her son was guilty of murder, right up until her death in 2013 at the age of 76. Now I'm curious about what you think about what happened next. So Marion Cameron had passed away in 2013. Andrew Cameron, who was then 47 years old, had at that time served almost 27 years of his minimum sentence, and he was released from prison so he could attend his mum's funeral along with his family. Now, obviously, reporters were there, and Andrew was said to be seen crying at the graveside of his mum, looking haggard and stooped, and handcuffed to a prison guard. So Andrew got to say his last goodbyes to his mum at her graveside with his family. However, when Nancy's sister Christine, who was 14 at the time her big sister Nancy was murdered, heard that the decision had been made to allow Andrew to attend his mum's funeral, she was horrified, saying, "I can't believe this has been allowed to happen. It's brought all the horror of my sister's murder flooding back." Sadly, she went on to say that both her mum and dad had since died, and she was just getting over the anniversary of their death, saying that, "I'm angry and upset. I can't understand why someone like that, who kills 2 young girls, gets the same privileges as anyone else." Going on to say, "My parents went to their grave still grieving for their daughter. They never got over losing Nancy." Heartbreakingly, she went on to say that, "I'm lost without Nancy and my parents, and every day I wonder what should have been like now. She was my best friend. All I have left are memories, and this is the last thing I needed to hear." Marion was laid to rest beside her husband, who had died in 1987 at the age of 56, and 2 of Marion's 4 children, Jack and Susan, and Marion's grandchildren left flowers at her grave. What do you feel about Andrew Cameron being allowed out of prison for his mum's funeral? Should that have been allowed, or do you think he should have had that privilege revoked after what he had done? Now, you might be wondering what happened to Marion's youngest son, Rodney, who had been 11 years old at the time his brother Andrew was arrested for Kay and Nancy's murder, as he wasn't mentioned having attended his mum's funeral like his other siblings. Well, we find out in February 2015, just over 2 years after Marion's funeral, when it was reported that 40-year-old Rodney had been sentenced to 4 years behind bars for inflicting, just like his brother Andrew, his own trail of suffering. 2 short years after Andrew Cameron had been jailed for murder, Rodney, who would have been 13 years old at this time, up until he was 20 years old in 1994, committed a series of sexual offences that spanned those 7 years, being found guilty of raping and assaulting one girl and carrying out lewd and libidinous acts towards another. Following Rodney Cameron being sentenced, a source close to the family expressed disbelief that both brothers, who Marion once described as her pride and joy, with her even referring to Rodney as her golden child, had ended up behind bars for such devastating crimes. Other sources suggested that Rodney had been tipped over the edge by Andrew's crimes and punishment, saying that the Cameron family could never be the same again after that. Whatever the reason, if there was one, for Rodney Cameron carrying out such atrocious acts, one thing was undeniable. This family had been responsible for an extraordinary amount of heartache, their legacy marked not by privilege and promise, but by the profound damage they left in their wake. Like I said, we'll be taking a break releasing our normal episodes in February, but we'll be back on the 10th of March. Our Scotland Then episode for 1986, around the time of Nancy Nichol's murder, will be released this week on our Braw and Belterian tiers on Patreon. The Scotland Then 1985 episode, which covers newspaper stories from around the time Wyllie was murdered, is already available on Patreon, and we'll be releasing early access episodes on Patreon throughout February. One final event I want to tell you about that myself and my husband Peter will be attending this year is the inaugural True Crime Festival event in London on the 28th of March between 11 and 6 p.m, along with many other true crime podcasters. You can find out more information and buy your ticket for this event by visiting truecrimefest.co.uk. This will be a small event with only 200 tickets available, and it is going to be very different from the CrimeCon events that we will also be exhibiting at this year and are so looking forward to attending. Different because it will only be true crime podcasters and listeners at the True Crime Festival, and us podcasters will be doing live talks on stage or in a nearby pub, getting you involved in interactive discussions around true crime and answering all your questions around the skills needed to host a true crime podcast. Whichever event you can make this year, whether it be CrimeCon Birmingham on the 25th of April, CrimeCon London on the 3rd and 4th of October, or the True Crime Festival on the 28th of March, we're really looking forward to seeing you and saying hi. You can find all links in the show notes or by visiting scottishmurders.com. So we'll see you back here on the 10th of March, but until then, I've been your host, dawn.
Scottish Murders is a production of Clurin Town.